I never thought I'd hear someone laugh at my mother's death, least of all my own husband, but there he was, standing in the middle of a dinner party, holding a half-full glass of bourbon, with that smug little smirk he always wore when he thought he was being charming, and then he said it. Well, at least her mom finally stopped complaining. Guess every cloud has a silver lining, huh? The room didn't laugh, not even a polite exhale. People froze, some blinking, some staring into their plates, some pretending to suddenly check their phones. But me? My whole body went numb. I felt the air leave my lungs, like someone had slammed a fist right into the center of my chest. My mother had died only 5 days earlier. 5 days, and he stood there making a joke. About her voice, about her existence, about the woman who raised me alone while juggling 2 jobs, like she was some punchline. I whispered, "Ethan, what the hell is wrong with you?" He shrugged, actually shrugged, and waved his glass in a circle like he was resetting the mood. "Relax, Olivia." It was funny. My vision blurred for a second. People whispered. Someone coughed loudly. I heard utensils clink nervously. But before I could even catch my breath, before I could even decide whether to scream at him or walk out, a deep, steady voice from the far end of the dining table cut through the tension like a knife scraping glass. That wasn't funny. The entire room turned toward him. His boss, Richard Halston, CEO of the company Ethan, had spent the last 7 years worshiping, climbing for, sacrificing for. A man you didn't just contradict, you waited for him to speak. Ethan straightened instantly, shoulders snapping back like a guilty child caught drawing on the walls. Richard set down his fork. The sound echoed too crisp, too sharp. He dabbed his mouth slowly with his napkin, then fixed Ethan with this cold, unblinking stare. "What you just said," Richard said, voice low but clear, "was cruel and incredibly revealing." Ethan swallowed. "Revealing?" Richard nodded once. The entire table leaned in subconsciously. "Yes, revealing." He looked at me, really looked, and his eyes softened. Then he looked back at Ethan, and the softness vanished. "You didn't just insult her, Mother. You told us exactly who you are." Nobody breathed. Not a sound. Not a chair shifting. Not a fork scraping. Ethan's face paled. "Richard, Simon, it was a joke. Lighten up." But Richard didn't blink. "I knew your wife's mother," he said quietly. My stomach dropped. I felt my pulse in my ears. "What? How?" Ethan whipped toward him. You knew her?" Richard exhaled, like he was trying to keep his own emotions steady. And then he said the words that shattered the night completely. "Your mother saved my life, Olivia." The room froze. My hands trembled. Ethan's jaw fell open, but Richard wasn't done. His voice lowered even further, heavy with gravity. "And Ethan? The way you just spoke about her tonight." He paused, let the silence press down like a weight on all of us. "Shows me exactly why the board and I have been re-evaluating your future at the company." Ethan's glass slipped from his hand. It shattered on the hardwood floor. Some guests flinched. Some gasped. Every head turned between Ethan and his boss and me. My heart hammered as the room spun. This wasn't just a comment. This wasn't just a reprimand. This was something bigger. Something with history. Something Ethan had no idea was coming. And I could feel it, that this moment, this night, this single cruel joke, was about to unravel the truth behind my husband's mask. A truth I didn't know existed. Richard folded his hands. "Since you like jokes, Ethan," he said calmly, "let me tell you one. It starts 15 years ago, in a hospital room, with a woman named Irene. My mother." My throat tightened. Ethan stared at Richard like he'd been slapped. And then, slowly, deliberately, Richard leaned forward and said, "And it ends with you losing everything if you don't start telling your wife the truth." My breath caught. The room stayed frozen. Ethan looked at me, his eyes darting, panicked, exposed. But he said nothing, nothing at all. And that silence, that empty, guilty silence, was the moment I realized I didn't know my husband. Not the real version. Not the one hiding behind the fake charm and designer suits. Not the one who just mocked the woman who raised me. I had married a stranger, a cruel one. And now, as Richard prepared to expose whatever Ethan had been hiding, I knew this night would change everything. If you had asked anyone who knew me a year ago who I was, they probably would have said something simple, something safe. She's Olivia Carter. Sweet, responsible, loves too hard, works too much, always tries to see the best in people. And they wouldn't be wrong. Most of my personality was shaped by one person, my mother, Irene Walker, a stubborn, hopeful, endlessly giving woman who raised me alone in Birmingham, Alabama. She worked double shifts at a local clinic just to keep the lights on, but she still found time to pack my lunches, iron my thrift store clothes, and sit on the edge of my bed every night telling me stories about strength. Liv, kindness is powerful, she'd say. But don't you dare let anyone mistake it for weakness. Back then, I believed it'd grow into her, someone gentle but unbreakable. But somewhere along the way, in the middle of building a Houston life, trying to make it, trying to prove myself, I realized I had become someone else entirely. Someone who apologized for everything. Someone who stayed quiet just to keep the peace. Someone who thought love meant endurance, not partnership. And that someone appeared the day I met Ethan. Ethan Carter, the man everyone thought was perfect. We met 6 years ago at a corporate networking event in downtown Houston. He was the guy everyone noticed the moment he walked in, not because he was handsome, though people said he was, but because he had this shine. Confident, charming, ridiculously well-spoken. He could talk about mergers with a CEO and then pivot into a joke with the catering staff without missing a beat. At least, that's who he pretended to be. We dated fast. We married even faster. A courthouse wedding, a small dinner with friends, nothing extravagant, just two people convinced they were building a future. Ethan worked at Halston Strategic Group, a powerful consulting firm run by Richard Halston, the same boss who froze the dinner party after Ethan mocked my mom. Ethan admired Richard almost obsessively. He talked about him like people talk about celebrities. Richard's brilliant. Richard built this company from nothing. When Richard sees potential in you, you're set for life. But the more Ethan praised him, the more I noticed something concerning. Ethan needed Richard's approval more than anything, more than my comfort, more than our marriage, more than basic decency. And whenever work became stressful, Ethan became someone else, irritable, dismissive, bitter. Yet outside the house, he was Houston's golden corporate boy. People loved him. They didn't see the eye rolls when I talked. They didn't hear the snide comments disguised as jokes. They didn't witness the slow erasing of my confidence. People didn't see the private Ethan, the one who believed emotions were weaknesses and empathy was optional. Our life in Houston. We lived in a quiet neighborhood west of downtown. Safe, quiet, too expensive for what it offered. I worked as a medical scheduler at Houston General, a job that wasn't glamorous but made me feel connected to people. Ethan said I lacked ambition. He said it often. Liv, you're too smart to stay at that place forever. You need to think bigger. Aim higher. But every time I explored something bigger, every time I considered applying for something new, he'd find a way to subtly discourage it. Now? Really? With Mom's medical bills. You're overly sensitive, Liv. These jobs will eat you alive. You're better at support roles anyway. Support roles, that's what he believed I was built for. My mother, the heart of everything. My mother had been sick for nearly 2 years, a long, exhausting decline. Ethan hated the hospital visits. He'd complain about the smell, about the waiting rooms, about how the drive ruined his evening. Yet, He'd always put on a sympathetic face in front of other people. Of course, we're helping Olivia's mom, He'd say proudly. I'm doing everything I can. But in private, he kept score. How long is this going to drag on? Your mom needs to get her affairs in order. We can't keep dropping everything for her. Every cruel word chipped away at me. But I stayed. Because that's what daughters do, they stand by their mothers. And that's what wives do, they try to keep the peace. And if I'm being brutally honest, part of me was afraid to face the truth, that the man I'd built a life with didn't care about the woman who meant everything to me. Richard Halston. The unexpected variable. Before that dinner party, I barely knew Richard. He was Ethan's boss, the powerful, intimidating CEO Ethan worshipped. I had only met him twice, briefly. He always struck me as serious but fair. I certainly had no idea he had ever crossed paths with my mother. But after the dinner party, after he said she saved his life, something shifted, in the room, in Ethan, in me. I realized there was a history I knew nothing about, a connection between my mother and Richard that Ethan had never mentioned, a connection that made Ethan panic, which told me one thing: Ethan had been hiding something long before the dinner party. Me, the woman behind the story. At 28, I wasn't the person I wanted to be. I was living inside walls I hadn't built, shrinking into spaces that weren't made for me. My mother's death, Ethan's callousness, Richard's revelation. All of it was about to force me to confront something I had avoided for years. Was I living my own life, or surviving someone else's? I wasn't angry by nature. I wasn't confrontational. I wasn't the type of woman who slammed doors or threw accusations, but I was observant and loyal. And once something clicked inside me, it didn't unclick. And after that night, after Ethan mocked my mother in front of a room full of people, something in me snapped, not violently, not loudly, but quietly, like a seam finally giving way after years of strain. The catalyst, the night everything shifted. The dinner party was supposed to be a career moment for Ethan, his chance to prove himself, as he called it. He spent days rehearsing conversation topics, planning his outfit, predicting how he'd impress the senior partners. But my mother's funeral had been just 48 hours earlier. I wasn't ready for a party. I didn't want to dress up. I didn't want to pretend everything was normal, Ethan insisted. "You'll be fine," he said. "You can't show up looking depressed. People will think you're unstable." Unstable. That was the word he used to describe grief. That night, the night of the dinner party, I had already been exhausted, raw, grieving, and Ethan knew it. But I still went. I still smiled politely. I still swallowed every ache, because I didn't want to ruin his moment. And he repaid that effort with a joke about my mother's death. That was the real beginning of everything that followed, the unraveling, the revelations, the betrayal, the karma. Because I wasn't weak. I was grieving. And grief has a way of stripping the fog from your vision and revealing the truth right in front of you. The night after the dinner party felt like a storm that never broke. A low, suffocating pressure hanging in the air, thick enough to choke on. Ethan and I barely spoke on the drive home. He sped the whole way, white-knuckling the steering wheel, his jaw twitching, his eyes flicking toward me every few seconds like he expected me to apologize. For what? For his cruelty? For his humiliation? For Richard calling him out in front of every partner he had been trying to impress? I didn't say a word. I just watched the city lights smear across the windshield, wondering how long I had ignored the kind of man he really was. The moment we walked into the house, he exploded. "You embarrassed me, Olivia." His voice echoed through the entryway. I flinched, not because he yelled, but because it was so predictable. Anytime something in Ethan's world cracked, he needed someone else to blame. "Ethan," I whispered, "you made a joke about my mother." "It was a joke," he snapped. "People make dark jokes all the time." "But you?" "You looked at me like I was some kind of monster. And right in front of Richard," my voice trembled. "You are acting like a monster." He froze. Then he laughed, bitter, cynical, disbelieving. "A monster? Really? Because I don't treat your mom like some saint," he scoffed. "Your mom wasn't perfect, Liv. She had her issues." I took a step back. "Don't talk about her." "Why not? You talk about her enough for both of us." That sentence hit me in a way he didn't expect, not like an insult, but like clarity. He resented her. He always had. He just never said it out loud. Ethan raked his hands through his hair. And what the hell was Richard talking about? Him knowing her? Her saving his life? That man is dramatic for fun. He wasn't being dramatic, I whispered. Oh, please. You think your mom was some hero? She was a nurse's assistant at best. Let's not act like she was. Stop. I didn't yell it. I didn't need to. The word came out firm, sharp, steady. He stared at me, surprised, even offended that I had interrupted him. But for the rest of that night, and the next morning, and the next, the tension sat between us like something alive. The days after the dinner party. By Monday, Ethan's panic was showing. He woke up before dawn, pacing around the bedroom, rehearsing explanations to give Richard. Hez overreacting. He misunderstood me. Hez been looking for a reason to challenge me for months. I'll fix this. He said those 4 words constantly. I'll fix this. Except none of those attempts included apologizing to me, or acknowledging my grief, or asking how I was sleeping, or how the funeral had gone, or how any of this felt. He wasn't trying to fix us. He was trying to fix his image. By that afternoon, he rushed home from work early, something he never did, and slammed his briefcase onto the kitchen table. He wants to meet with me tomorrow, he said breathlessly. Who? Richard. My stomach tightened. What did he say? That he wants a private, honest conversation. He rubbed his face hard. That's CEO language for you're screwed. I wanted to comfort him, a reflex I had trained myself into for years. But every time I opened my mouth, the memory of his joke punched me in the chest again. So instead, I said, maybe it's not what you think. He glared at me. Liv, do you even care if I lose my job? Of course I care. You don't look like it. I'm grieving. He threw his hands up. You're always grieving. My mouth fell open. He realized what he said only after it was out. For a moment, guilt flashed across his eyes. Then pride smothered it. I didn't mean it like that, he muttered. But he didn't apologize. He never apologized. Red flags I should have seen earlier. The next few days were a slow slide into something poisonous. Ethan became paranoid, checking his email every 5 minutes, clinging to his phone, obsessing about the dinner party like it was the only problem in our lives. Meanwhile, he barely acknowledged my mother's absence. Not once did he ask if I was eating, or sleeping, or even okay. Every morning, he'd mutter something like, this house feels depressing, or you're dragging the energy down, or don't start crying again. I can't deal with that today. He made grief feel like a burden. I felt like a burden. One night, I woke up around 2 a.m. and heard him whispering in the hallway. I stayed still, listening. No, I didn't mean it like that. Of course I didn't know she knew him. Stop stressing me out. I'm doing what I can. He was talking to someone. At first, I thought it was a colleague. But then I heard it. Don't bring that up again. That's not her business. Her, a woman. My stomach twisted. When I stepped into the hallway, he jumped like head, been electrocuted. The phone disappeared from his ear so fast he nearly dropped it. Oh, he said, voice cracking. You scared me. Who were you talking to? No one. Ethan. I said no one. And that was it. He walked back into the bedroom, slammed the door, and left me standing there in the dark. But the panic in his voice, the way he reacted, the way he kept saying that's not her business. It was a red flag I couldn't ignore, even if I didn't yet understand it. The envelope. 2 days later, I found something I wasn't supposed to see. Not because I went digging, I never went digging, but because Ethan dropped it on the floor while rushing out the door to meet Richard. A thin, white envelope from Halston's strategic group. I picked it up, my heartbeat slowed. It was sealed, but the flap wasn't fully pressed. Ethan had opened it already, just barely, the corner lifted. I don't know what possessed me. Shock, curiosity, self-protection, but I pulled out the paper inside, and everything I thought I knew about Ethan started to tilt. It wasn't a termination notice. It wasn't a complaint. It wasn't even about work performance. It was a summary of disciplinary warnings spanning the last 2 years, all filed by one person, Richard Halston. But that wasn't the part that froze my breath. At the bottom, handwritten, meeting required. Connection to Olivia Walker's mother must be addressed. My entire body went cold. Why would Richard bring up my mother in a formal warning document? Why would there be a connection worth discussing? Why would Ethan hide this from me? I read that line 5 more times before I heard the garage door open. Footsteps. Ethan. I shoved the paper back inside, stuffed the envelope into his briefcase, and sat on the couch pretending to scroll through my phone. He walked in, stiff, eyes darting. "You okay?" he asked. It was the first time he had asked me anything in days. But he didn't ask because he cared. He asked because he felt watched. He felt pinned. He felt hunted by something I didn't fully understand yet. And for the first time in our marriage, I felt something I hadn't allowed myself to feel. Suspicion. Little cracks everywhere. Over the next few days, the cracks widened. At dinner, he barely touched his food. At night, he flinched every time his phone buzzed. He stared out the window like someone was following him. I tried to talk to him softly, calmly, gently. "Ethan, are you okay?" Head shrug, or mumble something, or storm off. Then one morning, as I poured coffee, he muttered, "You should just stay out of this meeting tomorrow. Don't go anywhere. Don't talk to anyone. Don't make this worse." Make this worse. Like my presence was a liability. Like my grief was inconvenient. Like my mother's existence was a problem he needed erased. I stared at him. "Why would I make anything worse?" I asked quietly. He didn't answer. He just grabbed his keys and left. But as the door shut, I realized something. He was protecting something, hiding something. Something connected to Richard. Something connected to my mother. Something connected to the woman Head whispered to on the phone. And I felt it in my bones. Whatever truth was coming, it wasn't small. It wasn't trivial. It was about to blow the foundation of my marriage apart. The text message. The night before Ethan's big meeting with Richard, something happened that changed everything. I was in the kitchen, staring blankly at the fridge, unsure if I was hungry or just numb, when my phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. "You don't know me, but you need to hear what Richard is about to tell your husband tomorrow. Don't let Ethan spin it. You deserve the truth." I froze. My fingers went cold. I typed back, "Who is this?" 3 dots appeared. Then, "Someone who knew your mother." My breath caught. Another message, "Meet me tomorrow morning, before Richard sees him." I stared at the screen, pulse pounding. Because deep down, I already knew this wasn't just about a dinner party. This wasn't just about Ethan's cruelty. This wasn't just about my grief. There was something buried years ago. Something involving my mother. Something Ethan knew. Something he had hidden. Something Richard was ready to expose. And tomorrow, I would finally learn what it was. The morning of Ethan's meeting with Richard was gray. The kind of gray that seeps into your bones, quiet, heavy, unsettling. I barely slept. My mind kept circling around the text message from the unknown number. "Meet me tomorrow morning, before Richard sees him. You deserve the truth." Those words had crawled under my skin and stayed there all night. By sunrise, I already knew I was going. The meeting with the stranger. The address they sent led me to a small coffee shop in Midtown. Old brick walls, wooden tables, the kind of place that smelled like cinnamon and nostalgia. A woman sat in the back corner, mid-40s, tired eyes, dark curls pulled into a loose bun. She looked up the second I walked in. "Olivia?" she whispered, standing quickly. "Yes, that's me." She motioned for me to sit. Her hands trembled as she wrapped them around her coffee mug. "My name is Marla Jennings," she said softly. "I worked with your mother." My heart squeezed. "You knew her?" A sad smile crossed her face. Everyone knew Irene. She lit up a room. She held that clinic together, even when we were understaffed and drowning. Hearing someone talk about my mom like that, with warmth, with respect, it cracked something open in me. But then Marla's expression shifted. Careful, nervous. "Olivia, there's something you need to know before today plays out. My palms grew sweaty. What do you mean? She hesitated, like she was choosing each word one by one. Your mother didn't just work at the clinic, and she didn't just meet Richard by chance. There was an incident, something big, something your husband knows about. A cold rush went through my entire body. What incident? She exhaled shakily. Irene didn't just save Richard's life. She covered for him. She protected him from something that would have destroyed his career. What was it? Marla shook her head. That's Richard's story to tell. But you need to know this: Ethan was involved. Not directly, but enough that your mother stepped in. Enough that she made Richard promise something to her in return. My breath stalled. What promise? That he would never let Ethan climb high enough to hurt anyone. Not again. The room went silent. I heard the clatter of cups, soft jazz playing overhead, a door opening, but everything felt distant. What do you mean, hurt anyone? I whispered. Marla swallowed. I'm sorry, Olivia. I wish she had told you herself. But Ethan, Her phone buzzed. She checked it, eyes widening. Hess already in Richard's office. You need to go. Now. Because whatever promise Richard made, today might be the day he keeps it. The run to Halston Strategic. I don't remember much of the drive. Traffic honking, the hum of the engine, my fingers trembling on the steering wheel, it all blurred together. I only remember one thought. What was Ethan capable of, and what had my mother protected him from? By the time I reached Halston Strategic Group, my heart was hammering so fast it felt like it might crack. I sprinted across the marble lobby, ignoring the security guard calling after me. The elevator doors slid open just in time. When I reached the top floor, the hallway was silent. I walked toward Richard's office. My pulse thudded in my ears. My breath felt thin. Ethan's voice leaked through the door, shaken, defensive, desperate. That was years ago. I was a kid. You can't bring that up now. Richard's voice followed, deep, calm, controlled. It wasn't that long ago, Ethan, and you weren't a child. You were 22. 22. My chest tightened. I turned the knob, and the moment the door cracked open, I saw everything. The confrontation. Richard sat behind his desk, arms crossed, expression unreadable. Ethan stood in front of him, face pale, sweat beading on his forehead. When he saw me, he froze. Olivia? What are you doing here? Richard's eyes softened slightly. You shouldn't be hearing this secondhand. My voice trembled. Hearing what? Ethan stepped toward me. Liv, listen, it's not what it sounds like. Sit down, Richard said quietly. The authority in his voice didn't just fill the room, it rearranged it. Ethan lowered himself into the chair like a scolded child. Richard leaned forward. Olivia, I knew your mother. Long before this, a lump formed in my throat. I don't understand. You will. He looked at Ethan. Unless you want to explain it yourself. Ethan's face twisted, anger, fear, shame all tangled together. I don't owe her every detail, he muttered. Something inside me snapped. Yes, you do. My voice shook the walls. Even Richard blinked. I stood there, holding back tears with every ounce of strength I had left. Tell me, now. Ethan swallowed hard. Your mom. She covered something up for me. For us. For you. What did she cover up? He exhaled shakily. It was 5 years ago. Before we got married, I hit someone's car in the clinic parking lot. I blinked. That's it? He closed his eyes. No, I wasn't sober, and the car belonged to a patient inside. Your mom saw the whole thing. A cold pressure squeezed my chest. You were drunk? At her clinic? He nodded miserably. She pulled me inside, sat me down, and said, I'm not letting you ruin someone's life because you made a stupid choice. She made me call a tow truck. She made me pay for the repairs. She made me promise to get help. I stared at him, stunned, confused, hurt. She didn't tell me any of this. Because she didn't want you to see me differently. Richard shifted. That's not the whole truth, Ethan. Ethan's mouth snapped shut. I looked between them. What else? Richard stood slowly. There was a woman in the passenger seat. My stomach dropped violently. No, no. I shook my head. Ethan, please tell me he's lying. But Ethan's silence was the answer. My knees nearly buckled. You cheated on me, I whispered. I didn't cheat, we weren't married yet. You cheated on the life we were building, on the commitment you claimed we were making. He covered his face. I was stupid. I was drinking. I didn't mean. And you lied about it for 5 years? Tears blurred my vision. And my mother covered for you? Richard nodded. She saved you from a DUI. She saved your job at the time. She protected you because she hoped you'd grow up. I felt nauseous. Why didn't she tell me? Richard's voice softened. She believed people deserved second chances. She believed in redemption. But she also warned me if Ethan ever hurt you again, if he ever disrespected you, if he ever showed signs of who he used to be, I was to step in. My breath caught. Step in how? Richard looked straight into my eyes. To protect you. The room spun. My mother, my sweet, hard-working, selfless mother, had tried to protect me from a man I loved more than my own safety. And Ethan still mocked her death. Tears streamed down my face. You laughed about her, about the woman who saved you. Ethan reached for me. Liv, please. I stepped back. No, don't touch me. My voice cracked in a way I didn't recognize, a raw, breaking sound I didn't know I had. You destroyed every good memory I had left. Richard stood. Olivia, you don't need to stay here. But I did. Just long enough to look Ethan in the eyes and say the words that had been burning through my chest since that dinner party. You didn't just betray me. You betrayed the woman whose name you didn't deserve to say. And for the first time in our entire marriage, Ethan had nothing to say back. But as everyone filed out, whispering under their breath, something inside me shifted. Not anger, not sadness, just clarity. I didn't want Mark to follow me. I didn't want him to shout excuses. I didn't even want him to hurt the way he hurt me anymore. I wanted answers, real ones. I walked straight out of that building, ignoring the way Mark called after me. Lena. Wait, just wait. Cars hissed past on the wet pavement. The sky felt too bright, too open, like the world had turned its face up to watch this moment with me. I turned only when he reached me. His tie was crooked, his face pale. For the first time since Mom died, I saw him not as my husband, but as a stranger. Lena, he said, breathing hard. I didn't mean. What truth was he talking about? He froze. That was all I needed to know. Lena. I can explain. No. You can start talking. He swallowed, his jaw tightening like he was trying to physically hold his own words down. Then Roger stepped out behind him, hands in his pockets, watching us with a heavy expression like someone who wished he'd spoken sooner. Mark, he said quietly. You should have told her a long time ago. Mark spun around. Stay out of this. Roger shook his head. I stayed out for too long. I walked for blocks, letting the cold air sting my cheeks until my thoughts stopped spinning. For the first time in months, maybe years, the silence felt honest. No forced smiles. No trying to hold a marriage together on my own. Just the sound of my footsteps and the weight of my mother's locket against my palm. I ended up at a small park a few streets away, the kind with tired benches and a fountain that never quite worked right. I sat down, letting my breath settle, letting my heart slow. I thought it'd feel empty, but instead, there was this strange stillness, like my soul had taken a long exhale. I didn't know how long I sat there before I heard footsteps crunching over gravel. Lena? I turned. Roger. Of all people, I didn't expect him to follow me. He looked hesitant, almost unsure if he had the right to approach. Can I sit? He asked. I didn't trust my voice, so I just nodded. He lowered himself onto the bench beside me, careful to leave a respectful distance. For a moment, neither of us said anything. Then he spoke, quietly. Mark didn't tell you everything. My breath hitched. I thought I'd already heard the worst. But something in Roger's tone, low, heavy, told me there was one more piece I didn't know. What else could there possibly be? I whispered. Roger rubbed his palms together slowly, like he was debating how much to say. I kept my mouth shut for too long, he said. But after what happened today, you deserve the full story. I turned toward him, bracing myself. He took a slow breath. Your mother didn't just collapse outside our building. She collapsed outside my office window. I stared at him. He nodded, eyes full of regret. I saw her. I recognized her. She'd dropped her purse when she fell, and I remembered her picture from your desk the day you brought it in. I called for help right away, but it wasn't fast enough. A tear slipped down my cheek before I could stop it, not because he tried to save her, but because of the guilt in his voice, the guilt that didn't belong to him. She wasn't alone, I whispered. You were there. He nodded. And then he handed me something I didn't expect. A small phone. Black, slightly cracked on the edges. My mother's backup phone. I felt my breath stall. I hadn't seen it since the funeral. I didn't know how to get this to you, Roger said. When she fell, the paramedics kept her main phone for contact info. But this one, it was in her purse. I didn't go to the funeral because I didn't want to intrude, and then, time passed. It just got harder. I stared at the phone like it was radioactive. My hands trembled as I powered it on. The lock screen lit up. Battery at 8%. And immediately, 3 missed calls, all from Mom, time-stamped less than an hour before she died. My throat tightened so hard it hurt. Was she calling me? No. The calls were outgoing. She wasn't trying to reach me. She was trying to reach. My eyes widened. The call history showed 5 attempts, all to one number, Mark's. My heart squeezed. But then, a 6th number caught my eye. A final outgoing call, placed 19 minutes before she collapsed. Not to Mark, not to me. A number I didn't recognize. I clicked on the contact. R. Hale, Midtown office. Roger Hale. Her last call wasn't to Mark. It was to him. My breath caught. I turned sharply toward him. You talked to her? Roger's eyes softened with something almost painful. Yes, he said quietly. She called me because Mark wasn't answering. She said she didn't want to worry you. She said you were already carrying too much. That undid me. I covered my mouth as a sob escaped. She was scared, Lena, he continued gently. But she wasn't alone. I stayed on the line with her while coming down the elevator. She kept saying she didn't want to burden anyone. And when I got outside, she was already going down. I let out a broken breath. All this time, I imagined her alone, terrified, abandoned, but she wasn't. She had someone. Someone kind. Someone who didn't owe her a thing but stayed anyway. I wiped my face, forcing myself to breathe. Roger looked at me with steady, regretful eyes. I should have told you sooner, he said quietly, but I wanted to respect your grief, and I didn't want you to think I was telling you to turn you against Mark. I nodded slowly. Thank you, I whispered, for being with her, for everything. But then another thought hit me sharp, fast, electrifying. Why had Mark lied? Why hide that she called him? Why let me believe she died without reaching out? Why pretend he barely knew what happened? Roger watched my expression shift, and then he added, almost reluctantly, that's not even the real reason he hid it. I stared at him, pulse pounding. Roger exhaled. The truth he didn't want you to know is this. Your mother didn't just call him for company that day. He paused. She called because he told her something the week before, something that made her panic, something she thought you deserved to know. The world tilted. What did he tell her? Roger hesitated. Then, he told her he wanted a divorce. Before he ever told you. My breath stopped entirely. He told her, Roger continued softly, that he was planning to leave you, because Head met someone else. The park spun around me. My ears rang. My mother died thinking her daughter's marriage was falling apart because my husband told her, and then he let me grieve and blame myself alone. My heartbeat turned to fire. This wasn't just betrayal. This wasn't just guilt. This was premeditated cruelty. hidden behind fake sympathy and forced laughter. I didn't break. I didn't cry again. I just changed. Even my breath felt different. Because now, I understood. My husband wasn't just the man who laughed about my mother's death. He was the reason she spent her last days worrying about me. And that truth, that was the real twist. He shattered her heart before her heart gave out. I didn't walk home. I marched. Something inside me had shifted from shock to clarity, a clean, sharp knowing that cut through every ounce of fear I used to have. Each step felt like reclaiming a piece of myself that I'd handed to Mark one compromise at a time. By the time I reached our apartment, my breathing was steady. My spine straight. I wasn't the same woman who left that morning. Inside, the place looked exactly like it always did, neat, curated, perfectly decorated, like a showroom version of a life we never actually lived. Mark spun toward me the second I walked in. "Lena, thank God I thought you. Save it," I said quietly. He froze at the tone. I slipped off my coat, hung it up gently, deliberately, the calmness of my movements making his panic rise. "Lena, please," he said, voice shaking. "We just need to talk. We can figure this out." I didn't mean to laugh. I didn't mean to. "You didn't mean to tell my mother you were leaving me." His mouth snapped shut. Color drained from his face. "Roger told you?" he whispered. "No," I replied. "Your actions told me." The silence after that was thick enough to choke on. I walked past him into the living room, picking up the framed photo from our wedding day, the one he always bragged about because everyone said we looked like a perfect couple. I studied it for a moment. Then set it down. Not gently, he flinched. "Lena, please," she misunderstood, he stammered. "I was upset that day. I said things I didn't mean. I was stressed. You told her you met someone else." His breath came out in a ragged exhale. A confession in silence. He sank onto the couch, face buried in his hands. "I messed up," he whispered. "I messed up so bad. But it didn't mean anything. It was just a coworker. I swear it was stupid flirting. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't throw things. I didn't break down. I simply said, 'You broke her heart.'" He looked up, and then, I continued, "You broke mine." He shook his head rapidly, tears forming. No, I can fix this. I'll do anything. Therapy, counseling. I'll quit my job. I'll cut everyone off." "You already made your choices," I said. "Now I'm making mine." It took him a moment to understand. Then his voice cracked open. "You're leaving me?" I met his eyes. "Not leaving," I said softly. "Ending." He broke right there, crumbling in on himself, begging, apologizing, reaching for me like a drowning man reaching for land. But I stepped back, not out of cruelty, out of self-preservation. For the first time, I saw clearly what my mother had seen, the truth she tried to protect me from in her last days. I wasn't losing a husband. I was losing a weight I should have dropped a long time ago. I packed quietly, methodically, my movements steady, my mind clear. He followed me from room to room, voice hoarse, pleading, "Lena, please. I can change. I'll be better. Don't go. Don't do this." "You did this," I said gently, "long before today." When I reached the door, I paused. Not to look back at him, but to touch my mother's locket, resting warm against my skin. A calm washed over me. Not victory, not revenge, freedom. I opened the door. Mark let out a broken sound behind me. But I walked anyway, out of the apartment, out of the marriage, out of the life that had been quietly suffocating me. And for the first time in years, as the cool air hit my face, I felt something powerful. I was no longer afraid of starting over. I was afraid of staying. I didn't know what came next. But I knew this much: it was the beginning of my life. Not his, not ours, mine. In the weeks that followed, life didn't magically smooth itself out. Starting over never looks glamorous up close. There were long nights, quiet mornings, moments where the loneliness hit harder than the anger ever did. But every day, I woke up breathing a little easier. And Mark? Life caught up to him far faster than I expected. It started at his job. I didn't keep tabs on him, but news travels fast in office buildings, and even faster in the small world of corporate finance, where reputations shift like sand. Roger reached out to me one afternoon, with an update I never asked for. "I thought you should know," he said gently. "Mark's been put on probation." Apparently, HR had opened an investigation after the conference room meltdown. Too many joking comments about serious matters, too many emotional outbursts, too many coworkers who'd been quietly bothered by his behavior for years. In my grief, I hadn't realized how many of his harmless jokes had been using on everyone, not just me. And now, after learning what had done to me and my mother, his coworkers wanted nothing to do with him. His shine was gone. Then came the second wave. The coworker had flirted with? She reported him for inappropriate messages Head sent while still married, messages he once swore were barely anything. HR took those seriously. And suddenly, Mark went from golden boy to liability. He wasn't fired, not yet, but he was removed from major client accounts. Partners no longer trusted him. His promotion track was paused indefinitely. For a man who built his identity on being the rising star, the favored employee, the guy who always came out on top, it was a blade straight to his ego. And then, slowly, his personal life cracked open, too. His family, the same people who once adored him, reached out to me to apologize after hearing the truth. His sister called me in tears, saying, "I had no idea, Lena. He told us you walked out for no reason. But when they realized why I left, they stepped back from him." Even his own father, a man who shared Mark's habit of turning everything into a joke, told him, "You pushed too far. You crossed a line you can't step back from." Isolation crept into Mark's life like winter frost, shrinking everything around him. But here's the part that surprised me most. I didn't feel satisfaction, not the way I thought I would. Karma wasn't a fireball crashing down on him. It wasn't loud or dramatic. It was quiet, steady, unavoidable. His losses weren't about revenge. They were about consequences he built with his own choices, one selfish moment at a time. And me? I kept moving forward. I found a small apartment. I started therapy. I rebuilt my routine in slow, gentle steps. There were still days when grief pressed on my chest, days I wished I could call my mother and tell her everything, tell her I finally listened to the warnings hidden in her worry. But on those days, I held her locket. And I reminded myself that walking away wasn't the end of something. It was the beginning. Karma didn't destroy Mark. It simply stopped protecting him. And for the first time in a long time, I felt protected by something bigger than pain. I didn't realize how much lighter life had become until one quiet Sunday morning, months after everything happened. I was standing in my tiny kitchen, bare counters, mismatched mugs, sunlight spilling through cheap blinds, and for the first time in years, the quiet didn't feel lonely. It felt peaceful. I made coffee. I opened the window. I let the cool breeze fill the room. And I realized I wasn't waiting for the next apology. I wasn't waiting for the next hurt. I wasn't waiting at all. I was simply living. A few days later, I found an envelope taped to my apartment door. My stomach twisted when I saw the handwriting. Mark. I stood there for a long moment, debating whether to open it. Part of me didn't want to give him any more space in my life, even in written form. But curiosity, or maybe closure, nudged me forward. Inside was a single sheet of paper. No grand speeches, no manipulation, just a few messy lines. "Lena, I'm sorry. Not because I want you back. Not because I deserve forgiveness. But because I finally understand what I did. I lost my wife. I lost my job. I lost the respect of people I cared about. And I earned all of it. The truth is..." I laughed because I didn't know how to deal with feelings that deep. "I pushed you away because it made me feel powerful. I hurt you because I didn't know how to love you the right way. I hope you find a life where nobody ever makes you feel small again, Mark." I read it twice. And then, instead of crying or trembling or getting angry, I just folded it neatly and set it aside. Not because it didn't matter, but because it didn't control me anymore. His remorse wasn't a bridge. It was simply a mirror, showing me how far I'd already walked without him. A visit I owed. A week later, I drove to the cemetery where my mother rested. It had taken me months to feel strong enough to visit without collapse, but this time I didn't feel dread. I felt ready. The grass was soft beneath my shoes. A faint breeze stirred the trees. Birds chattered somewhere behind me, like they were filling the space with warmth. I knelt beside her headstone. "Hi, Mom," I whispered. And for the first time since she passed, I didn't fall apart. Instead, I told her everything, the truth about that day, what Mark said, what Roger revealed, how I finally left, how I was rebuilding. "I'm okay now," I whispered. "I promise." My throat tightened, but the tears that came weren't the kind that tore you apart. They were soft, grateful. "I wish you could see me now," I said, brushing my fingers across her name. "I think you'd be proud." A small wind lifted my hair off my face gently, the kind of soft, perfect breeze that feels like someone's touch. And for a brief moment, I felt something warm in my chest. Not sadness. Presence. Life didn't suddenly explode with joy, but small good things started showing up. I joined a grief support group, made a couple of new friends, picked up photography again, something I'd abandoned during my marriage because Mark always said, "It's just a hobby, don't take it so seriously." I took pictures of sunsets, city streets, strangers who let me capture their smiles. And slowly, my world began to fill with color again. I also ran into Roger a few more times, once at a coffee shop, once by accident near my new apartment. We didn't talk about what happened. We didn't talk about Mark. He always asked how I was doing, and never pushed. And I realized something. Some people walk into your life to break it. Others walk in to help you rebuild, quietly, without asking for anything in return. Roger was the second kind. I didn't know if it would become more than friendship. I wasn't rushing it. For the first time, I wanted to build a life from my own strength, not from the shadow of someone else's. One evening, as the sun dipped low and the sky turned soft gold, I sat on my tiny balcony, sipping tea, thinking about everything I'd been through and the message I wished someone had told me sooner. So, here it is. If someone laughs at your pain, listen. If someone makes you question your worth, listen. If someone turns your grief into their punchline, listen. Not to them, not to their excuses or their apologies, but to the quiet voice inside you, the one that's been whispering long before the hurt became loud. This is not love, and you deserve better. Leaving isn't weakness, starting over isn't failure, and the end of one story, even a painful one, doesn't mean you're broken. Sometimes it means you're finally free. My husband laughed about my mother's death, but that was the moment my life shifted. Because when someone shows you how little they value your heart, you learn how fiercely you need to protect it. And when his boss opened his mouth and told the truth, the room froze, my world cracked open, and everything in me finally woke up. Pain didn't ruin me, it revealed me. And now, I'm building a life where grief is honored, love is gentle, and my mother's memory isn't a wound, it's my compass. And I'm finally walking in the right direction.